Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Limbach, and I'm the producer of the PharmaVOICE webcast network. I will be your off-camera facilitator for today's session. Welcome to our event entitled Combining Patient Data with the Patient Voice, a Novel Approach. Brought to you by PharmaVOICE in partnership with our good friends at Rare Patient Voice and Clinakos. We have an outstanding crowd today with executives from across the industry and around the world. Thank you for investing the time to attend. We'll certainly do our very best to make it worth your while. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acquaint you with a couple features of our webinar technology. Your GoToWebinar control panel will give you access to several functions. If you can hear me but are experiencing problems seeing the slides or the panelists' webcams, you may want to try logging in using a different browser, and we recommend the latest versions of Firefox and Chrome. Tablets and smartphones also work if you have the free GoToWebinar mobile app. For any other issues, use the robust help options from your control panel or visit gotowebinar.com. We are taking questions from the audience today, and you can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation. Just type your question into the questions text area in your control panel and click the send button. We are also recording this event, and we will send you a link to the on-demand archive in about 24 hours so you can review the event at your leisure. We'll also have several audience polls during the event, so get ready to participate with those. Now that we're through with the housekeeping details, let's dive into the program. We have a very knowledgeable pair of experts with us today, so let's meet our esteemed speakers. We're happy to welcome Wes Michael, President and Founder of Rare Patient Voice, LLC. We also have Inder Jaggi, CEO and Founder, Clinakos. Now I'm going to hand it off to Wes to start the presentation. Wes, take it away.
All right, thanks, Dan. First, a little bit about where we're coming from in our companies. At Rare Patient Voice, we connect patients and caregivers with the opportunity to voice their opinions. We do that through inviting them to surveys, interviews, various kinds of research to help our clients who are looking to improve their products or services, their new treatments, whatever it might be. These are patients that have signed up because they want to participate in research. We've got over 100,000 patients, caregivers in the U.S. across more than 600 diseases and conditions, including many, many rare diseases, as you'd expect from the name of our company, as well as oncology. We've been around since 2013, and we've conducted over 5,000 studies. We'll get into more detail about our panel and how it relates to this offering as we go through the talk today. Inder?
Thank you, Wes, and thank you, Dan, for actually inviting us to present. I'm actually very happy to be here to talk to everybody about our capabilities together with Rare Patient Voice. As a quick introduction on Clinakos, since 2013, we have been the leading provider of patient-centric data and solutions. We have access to well over 90% of the US population, data coming from their EMRs, their pharmacies, their labs, claims, devices, and so on and so forth. We have built a very unique capability over the years where we have the capability to apply technology and the latest privacy regulations and standards to not only getting access to data based on patient consents, but also apply this data to learnings for our sponsors, whether be it outcomes or real world evidence or insights. And I'm extremely happy to be here and walk you through our experiences of doing that over the last several years. We will start with a poll on trying to understand our audience. So Dan, if you can show the poll.
Absolutely. So if you see this blue template on your screen, you can respond. And we just like to know what organization type you're coming from, so we have a better idea of who's in the audience today. Are you pharma, biotech, and med device? Are you with a CRO, drug development, or clinical trial organization? Are you with a market research company, a consulting company, or something else, perhaps academia? So we're going to give everyone a moment to get their results in. We've got a lot of responses coming in. Okay, I'm going to say last call and close the poll. And let's share with the audience who else we've got here. So we got a pretty good mix across the board. I would say pharma, biotech, and med device is the top group here. Plenty of people in market research and consulting. We've got a handful of people, well, more than a handful, but 8% of our people are with a CRO or drug development clinical trials company. And then about a fifth of us are from other types of organizations. So that's a great mix. Let's close that, and you can continue the presentation.
Okay, going back to the presentation, Wes, take it away.
All right, well, that's interesting. It looks like we have a great mix of folks from different aspects of the industry. And I think what we're covered today, you'll find all those different areas will find something that's relevant for them. I was at a wedding this past weekend, and you probably say, well, I didn't tune in to hear about my personal, but anyway, you know, I was thinking about it. It's two very impressive young people that were coming together as one to begin what will be a great family. And that's what we're announcing today. We have two great approaches that have been used to get great types of patient information, but we're bringing them together to start something much more powerful as the two together. So to break it down into different points, first we're going to talk about this disconnect between market research, you know, patient market research and the data initiatives, the patient data initiatives, why they have been apart, and how we're going to bring them together. And the second one is there's been regulatory changes. This is something that could not have been done a year ago. This is new news, the fact that we can bring these together due to regulatory changes. So we'll explain a little bit about that. And then we'll go into what our approach is. How are we combining, how we are marrying these two areas of patient market research with the patient data, with the approach we have. We're excited to share an actual case study, a real world case study that we conducted with a certain rare cancer group of patients. We'll cover the various patient populations that we have available that you may be interested in using this approach with, and we'll certainly provide time at the end for questions and answers. And you can submit those again as we go through into the question box so that you don't forget them. If you're like me, if you get 5 minutes past that, you'll have forgotten what you were thinking. But then again, you're probably not as bad as I am at that. So what are some of the issues with current biopharma market research? You know, syndicated data is great, but it doesn't answer specific questions you may have. And in that sense, it can be incomplete. And it's whatever the date it was last done. And so it may not be up to date. It's very difficult to get complete longitudinal records throughout the healthcare system. How a patient has been treated over time and for what. Typically, research methods we have get one point in time, and it's usually the most recent point in time, and not the whole long journey that's gotten patients to where they are on this particular day. Most of the work that we do at Rare Patient Voice, I think it's terrific, but we're relying on the patient to tell us what's happened. And that's great to get their understanding, their point of view of their experiences, their attitudes, their emotions, whatever it might be. It's not so great to get some facts that may not be something the patient's capable of remembering and having, you know, knowing in detail. For example, when was the diagnosis made? What actually was the diagnosis? Who made it? What are the current medications? What did they take before? I mean, think of some of the cancer medications, the treatments, combination therapies that change, and they're on platinum or they're on CAR-T. It's very confusing to patients. And if you just rely on them telling you, you're going to be missing some of the information that you need. And lab values, which physicians treated them. So a lot of great information we get, but there's certainly gaps by going to the patients alone. Next slide. So this disconnect, again, there's two separate approaches, and they both have value. We're depicting them both here as wonderful tropical islands. You know, on the left is the tropical island of patient market research. They can be surveys, they can be patient interviews, they can be chart audits, which are generally done through physicians pulling charts about the patients. It can be patient-reported outcomes. So very good research. We've done them for years. They're very valuable, but they're separated from the other wonderful tropical island, right? The data initiatives. All the wonderful data that we get, either in aggregate or de-identified. The claims data, the electronic medical records data, you know, the prescription data, labs data. So again, lots of good data there. but they're separated. What do we have? We have sharks in the water between these islands. These islands are not able to combine. They're not able to work together. There's privacy rules. We're listening to your HIPAA, and then the various regulations like the California Act, the CCPA, and in the EU you have GDPR, compliance issues. I mean, it's interesting. Patients, we often get the question, well, doesn't HIPAA prevent patients from telling? No, patients actually aren't covered by. Patients are allowed to tell us anything they want. So that's good. But other people can't tell us who patients are. They can't say this data was a patient. That all has to be done with consent. And again, so that's why these worlds have been separated until now with the sharks in the water. So how can we bridge this gap? Let's go to the next one. So we have a bridge there now. We are linking. We can link this data with the patients giving their survey or their interview data or chart audit data or patient reported outcomes data. If patients give us their consent, we'll show you now, we can link that with the claims data about that specific patient, the EMRs, the medications. We can link those together. We have now the best of both worlds. The information you get from the patients themselves, their experience, how they feel about things, how they react to your concept, and really where they come from a fact-based area, not just their opinions, but the facts that the medical records tell us about each and every patient. And this is all due, the way we can now offer this and why this is new news is due to regulatory changes, and I'll turn it to Inder to go through that.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you. I couldn't have said this as well as you did. A couple of points to add here from what we have seen based on our expertise, data expertise, and working with well over about 50 partners over the last several years. We see our clients spending literally billions with a B, sometimes large companies spending billions of dollars on buying different types of data. And then, we see them trying to use this data to understand patients and journeys and answer questions with respect to launching new products or trying to get new label extensions and so on and so forth. And on the other side, we see patients coming together as a part of clinical trials, or patients coming as a part of surveys or patient interviews, or one of the other instruments that several instruments get used. And there is really a disconnect where they are not able to map this data on which they've spent a lot of money to actual patients. And that is what is unique about the relationship that Wes and I are talking about today. The new approach that we are going to be proposing today is actually going to give you a mechanism to do that, which we are very, very excited about. And why is this possible? Clinakos as a company has been focused on patient data since 2013. We've actively been able to, through our integrations, gather data, but frankly, we were limited because of one major reason till very, very recently, and that was the concept of data blocking. I am assuming a number of you on the call are familiar with the concept of data blocking. Data blocking was where organizations like specialty pharmacies, like EMRs, purely for reasons where they wanted to actually have proprietary access to data, were not sharing data, in some cases, even with the patients. And I like to say that the world changed for us in March of 2020, and that was not because of COVID. What happened in March of 2020 was game-changing for our industry. And essentially what happened was the Health and Human Services in the United States came up with what is known as a final data blocking rule, effectively forcing all the elements in the healthcare system, whether it being pharmacies or EMRs or labs, to share data, assuming that there was patient consent. So again, if there is a patient consent, then all these entities are now required to share data for that particular patient, which actually, because of COVID, the rule came out in March of 2020, but because of COVID-19, the implementation got pushed to April 5th of 2021. So literally it's been only a few months since this rule is now finally in place, and it gives us a lot of advantages and opens a lot of avenues, which is what makes us really excited about this opportunity. Before we jump into our approach, it would be useful to us to find a little bit about the attendees of the call in terms of what type of patient data do you find to be useful. And there are some options here. You can pick one or as many as you think are useful. Dan, back to you for the poll. Okay, Dan, I'm assuming you're going to present the results of the poll.
Yes, I'm sorry, Inder, I was on mute. So it's not surprising that at least half of the audience would like to see all of these types of data, and even as much as 72% would like to see surveys and interviews. Do you have any feedback on that, either of you?
I can start, and I would certainly like Wes to comment. That is exactly what we have actually heard from our audience. And one of the biggest things that we've heard from audiences that very few people are even aware of this opportunity to get all this data on the studies that they do, whether it be surveys or interviews or chart audits or so on and so forth. Wes, what is your experience?
Yeah, this is very interesting in that all these types of data are useful, obviously, to so many, at least the majority in every case. I mean, almost 3/4 are doing surveys and interviews, but until now, they don't have the opportunity to link it to each of those other types of data, which already are very important. So as I said, it's like we were saying before, all these are very important, very useful now, and moving forward by linking them will make them even more powerful, I think.
Excellent. All right, so continuing with our presentation, I am going to move. So let me start by presenting the approach that I'm talking about. Just to confirm, Dan, we are able to see the screen. We're back to full screen.
I'm seeing a blue screen, Inder.
Okay.
So make
and let me make sure that I share it again, and tell me if you can see it now.
There we go. Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry for that. So excited about presenting this new approach. Effectively, we have created a very straightforward, common sense based 3-step model or 3 set of capabilities which make the new method that we are presenting today possible. So as a first component of this offering, Wes will talk about this in a little bit of detail. We have actually combined a capability. We have now a capability of access to patients. The first set of patients that Wes obviously is going to talk about is patients who have already expressed an interest to participate in research. We have patients of over 600 diseases. In addition to that, we have access through to well over 1,400 different advocacy groups and organizations who actually are also motivated to move their respective therapeutic areas or treatments for those areas forward, and are very motivated to refer more patients as required. In addition to that, we have access to additional data sources if there were more patients which were required. These are registries or panels or other types of physician approaches where we can get access to these patients who can participate in these projects to be able to not only answer survey questions and be available for interviews, but also agree to sharing their data for research purposes. Combining with number one is number two, which we're going to talk about in a lot of detail, where we have a very unique set of technologies that we are bringing to the table, where we can get data now from well over 99% of the pharmacies in the US, well over 70,000 pharmacies, 90%, well over 90% of the EMRs in the US, over 35 different EMRs, most major labs, most major payers, and then also digital devices. So we are talking Fitbits of the world or Apple Watches or 100 or 200 plus different digital devices, where we can now link the data for these patients coming from these sources. And then third, since we're also going to talk about how we can use advanced technologies to get insights from this data in a 100% compliant fashion. With that, let me just jump on to more details on number one. Wes, do you want to take over from here?
Sure. So as we say, we already in our panel, we have 100,000 folks with 600 more rare and non-rare conditions. This is kind of a greatest hits list, if you will, just a teaser slide, and we'll get into more. And we actually publish our entire list and our number of patients in each one. But if you look on the left, there's 17 of some of the rare diseases we get asked about most often. Take a look through that. You might see things, areas you might be interested in. And then certainly cancer has been a huge category, thank God, all the improvements, all the progress that's been made there across so many different tumor types. You'll see a lot of the cancer diseases. Again, we'll get into some more and we'll share even more details. But this is, all these patients have signed up with us because, for one simple reason, because they're interested in sharing themselves in research. We're not offering them wonderful content and things like that. We're basically just offering the opportunity to take part in research. So because of that, we get a very good response from these folks, and you know, you can see that as you delve into diseases of interest to you. Can you go to the next one? How do we recruit them? Well, pre-COVID certainly, we went to hundreds and hundreds of patient events. You know, there's walks, there's conferences, there's symposia. We go there with our polo shirt with the logo and our signage and our clipboards and our giveaway items, and meet people. And it's great to meet patients and their families and explain to them how they can sign up, how it's confidential, how they can take part, how they can get compensated for taking part. We work with advocacy groups, as it says here, 1,400 plus advocacy groups we're adding on every week to advocacy referral partners. The advocacy groups often help us recruit. They spread word out to their members. Even individual partners are very useful to us. They may be in a support group and they spread the word in the support group. They may run a closed Facebook page and they spread the word there. If it's a genetic disease, they can spread it among family members too. So all these various methods have helped us grow the panel to what it is, and help us when we reach into new areas, new disease and condition areas that you may have, gives us a head start to try to get even more patients that may be needed for whatever the need is, whatever the, you know, especially if it's quantitative and you need more folks, or if it's a very rare area, and even a few will be very helpful to get as many as those are. We list here just a few of the many advocacy groups, just to give you a flavor of, you know, they're large, they're small, they're all over the map. We love them to death.
Excellent. Thank you, Wes. So that was step one of our process. Step two, obviously, once we have these patients signed up for these projects or studies and provide their consent to share their data, we as Clinakos come in, and essentially with our cloud platform, we have access to tens of thousands of primary patient data sources. Again, we are talking pharmacies. I talked about the fact that we are integrated directly and indirectly with well over 99% of the pharmacies in the US, 70,000 plus pharmacies, most major labs, peers, devices like Fitbits of the world, EMRs. We can also get social determinants of health and sometimes integrate this data with our client data. Sometimes, we work with manufacturers who want to get data on either enrich a clinical trial, where they want to enrich clinical trial data with additional data, or real world data, or data coming from specialty pharmacies or patient support programs and so on and so forth. We can do that as well. So again, once we have consent from patients, we are able to very, very efficiently leverage our integrations on the cloud to be able to get access to data for those patients in a very efficient manner. One of the challenges, and this is where I think Clinakos has spent the last about 8 years perfecting this model. Obviously, it's taken us a lot of time to build these integrations that we've just described in the last slide, and then after that also be a trusted partner in the system, get certified by thousands and thousands of data sources, just like Wes has relationships with thousands and thousands of patient advocacy groups. But in addition to that, one of the challenges that we faced with this approach was for especially the sicker patients, for a sicker population, sometimes you're seeing hundreds of charts on a single patient. You're seeing surgeries, you're seeing hospitalizations, you're seeing referrals, prescriptions, you're seeing all sorts of dozens and dozens of different types of documents, EMR notes, so on and so forth. And it is extremely hard when you're analyzing this data for a whole population to do this manually. Literally, when we started, we would have oncologists and pharmacists actually physically review these charts and come out with patient journeys and so on and so forth. Fortunately, because of technology approaches, tools like AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, or natural language processing, we at Clinakos actually have used a lot of these tools to be able to now automate a lot of this work, so that patient journeys or current medications or confirmation of diagnosis, which is a big need, where most of our clients actually, when patients sign up for research, they don't know if they actually have the diagnosis. Sometimes even the patients are not sure in terms of what exact biomarkers do they have in a particular cancer, or what stage of a cancer do they have. It is very important in that case for us to get their data and then be able to leverage some tools to see what is the exact diagnosis and confirm that diagnosis, especially if there are regulatory reasons to do that. So again, we've built a lot of these tools which give us the capability to be able to apply technology to then come up with insights on these patients, which become extremely important. I think this is something that most people would relate with. On the data side, you would see, no matter the historical or traditional approaches that most people have used for data, is either going to claims-based data sources or EMR syndicated data sources, or sometimes they would actually do chart audits. You would work with a tertiary care center, somebody like a Mayo Clinic or a UCSF or Stanford or somebody like that, where you would get access to charts of patients. And no matter whichever approach you choose, there are going to be holes. There's going to be holes because claims would not cover complete patient journey, especially if there was no reimbursement. EMRs, you can get data from one EMR, but an average Medicare patient sees 13 physicians, and you're not going to see data from other EMRs. Chart audits, again, you get access to detailed charts from one tertiary care center, but that does not mean that you will see data from everywhere else. Our approach, I'm proud to say, merges everything. So we have the capability to actually get all what you see on this slide, and that is very powerful. That is what gives us a complete view of the patient, a complete patient journey, and makes the solution offering extremely powerful. What are some of the projects that we have done? It actually is extremely interesting. Historically, a lot of work that we have done is in the post-marketing area. So, things like patient journeys or chart audits, or trying to understand what are the open data questions which our sponsors are trying to answer, historically have been what we've been able to accomplish with this, physician journeys, so on and so forth. We are actually seeing a revolution in how this approach is being used, and we are very excited. Some of this is, we've seen, I would say, record attendance for this event. And the reason why we are seeing record attendance for this event is that now this approach is not only being used in historically post-marketing situations, but also in pre-marketing situations where you seeing real-world data being used to design synthetic arms in clinical trials, or real-world data being used for expanding a label for already approved drugs. So there are so many new unique use cases that we are seeing come up in the last few months that this approach has been out, and it gives us a lot of excitement. I would like to point out one very interesting fact which most people might or might not be familiar with. Most people do not know this, but a large percent of the approval for the COVID vaccine, especially the Pfizer vaccine, was based on actually real world data coming from Israel. One of the things that Pfizer did, very smart move, fairly early on, was that their vaccines were given in Israel, and one of the parts of the deal that was done with the government of Israel was, in return for making the vaccines available to Israel, they got the real world data, which actually helped them get approval, expedite the approval, which was a win-win. It was a win-win for everybody. It was a win-win for obviously Pfizer as a sponsor, but also as society at large, because I think all of us know how game-changing the COVID vaccines have been. So the opportunities for this approach for leveraging real world data are significant, and that is what makes us really, really excited. We have some examples here of the kind of analysis that we've seen possible here. It's again, a drop in the bucket. What we are showing, we've done this many times and with many different use cases, but we have done multiple projects in terms of patient journey analysis, or even physician journeys on how physicians treat, how they prescribe, so on and so forth. When they switch medications, what are the rules of engagement with respect to switching medications? So it is, the use cases are many in terms of applying this technology. With that, I would like to move on to an actual example of how we have been able to use this quite recently, a few months back. So here, what we're going to do is Wes and I are going to together present a case study that we had done jointly a few months back. A client in this case was a biopharma company who was trying to understand a rare oncology population. They actually, in this case, the client had access to all sorts of data. They had spent significant amount of money buying all sorts of data, doing all sorts of patient research projects. And again, the challenge was to link that with actual patient surveys and so on and so forth. So that is why they engaged us. And this was, again, a time critical project where they were looking for results in a time critical manner. We were able to, from the point of start of this project till the end of the project, execute this project in approximately 10 weeks, and able to get very detailed results. Not only based on the patients, information provided by the patients, but also the records that we were able to aggregate from these patients. The way we executed this project was the patients were recruited through the panel that Rare Patient Voice had. We were able to advantage once we pulled the data, once we had the consent and we pulled the data, we had significant advantage where we could apply the exclusion and exclusion criteria pretty easily because we had access to actual primary data on these patients, and that gave us a lot of advantage. Once we did that, obviously to respect patient confidentiality, we de-identified this data and we created what we call is digital twins, which is a buzzword for a de-identified patient who actually cannot, where we are protecting their privacy, and yet we understand what is happening with their journey. The journeys were all mapped. Again, the project duration was about 8 to 10 weeks or so, and we were able to do this pretty efficiently to the satisfaction of the client. We had several learnings from this case study. I'm going to present some of them today. One question we get asked all the time is that, are patients comfortable consenting to share their medical records? And the fair answer is not everybody is comfortable with that. In our study, or the patients who actually were approached, 71% were comfortable enough in terms of providing a consent to make their medical records available, which in our mind was a very nice number. The good news is that even from the 71% of the patients who were recruited to do this, we were able to pull 100% of the records. So every patient who consented, we were able to get medical records on those. To give you an idea on how comprehensive these records were, they ranged from 2008 to 2021. So again, this project was done very recently, 2021. We literally got records going back to 2008 and records going to one day before we were able to, pull this data. So essentially pretty real-time or near real-time results. We averaged about 127 charts per patient for a single patient, which is actually significant. This was obviously a sicker population. In terms of medications, an average number of total medications, again, a sicker population that a patient had taken in the last 12 months was 39, which is again large, but again a very sick population, rare oncology setting. 280 different medications that the population had taken, and 21 current medications per patient that they were currently on at the point of time that we were doing this study. In terms of diagnosis, again, fairly sick population. An average was 39 diagnoses, 39.2 diagnoses per patient, 322 different diagnoses. The last point, the 7% number, is very, very important. The reason why that is very important is we actually found that we had always assumed that the patients are not the best custodians of their data. And we actually found that. So in 7% of the cases for the patients who consented, we found that the patients actually did not even have the exact diagnosis that they were assuming that they had. Patients would often tell you that they have breast cancer, but that is the extent of what they know. If you ask them specific questions in terms of whether it's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, whether it's HER2 positive or HER2 negative, or specific questions like that, they often do not know the answer to that. So a lot of times in clinical studies and projects, they would sign up for projects and still this data gets submitted in regulatory settings or otherwise, and it is, by the time you realize that it's actually, even the patient shouldn't even be a part of the study, it's too late. So with this approach, we were able to actually rule out those patients, which was actually very interesting. In terms of labs, again, a lot of color on the labs, 192 labs per patient, 420 different lab codes for this cohort, which gave a lot of color and some sample labs here. Wes, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, two things impressed me when the results of this study. One which surprised me and one which didn't surprise me. What didn't surprise me was the high percentage of folks that consented, because as you said, Inder, it's like it's an open question how likely are patients to consent to this. But I wasn't surprised in that the patients that have signed up with us, again, they've signed up specifically because they want to share their information. We get consents of various types for various types of projects, be it do an ethnography in their home, be it put a device on their computer to track their, all sorts of things that I myself might not consent to, but we see the patients very eager to consent. So that didn't surprise me, but I was very happy to see it. What did surprise me was how we got such a high percent where you were able to access the records. We hear over and over, hey, people say they can get records, but they get up to 30%. Any one source, they just can't get it that many. So to be honest, I was skeptical. You said you could get that. I said, well, let's see what we get. And we don't want to promise 100%. I mean, but we think we can get 90%. In this case, it was 100%. So it's amazing how the contracts, if you will, the relationships you've built and the use of that anti-blocking law have now made those available. So when we get the folks to consent, we'll get a very high percentage of the records. So and again, that very much bowled me over, if you will.
Thank you, Wes. Thank you. So sharing just one very specific example, and we've de-identified this example to just give an idea to the audience in terms of how much potential there is in this approach and in this technology. One of the interesting aspects of the data that we get is EMR notes, which are actually, as you know, very hard to find, especially in rare diseases where sometimes there's not even a diagnostic code, or in oncologies where there are no codes for stage of diseases or biomarkers or so on and so forth, which are all very important. EMR notes become extremely important. And what we found here was very detailed EMR notes where we saw biopsies, we saw biomarkers, CD10, BCL2, BCL6, some of them are Ki67. These are all very, very relevant biomarkers in this case for oncology, but also for rare diseases, also for some of the newer treatments, for gene therapy products or other types of products. Some of this information is game changing, whether your Ki67 fraction is X or Y could actually have a significant effect on whether you're a candidate for a study or a clinical trial or even a treatment. So we were very excited to see very, very detailed results, which actually gave us a lot of confidence. And I would like to point out that this is based on primary documents, healthcare documents, and they, in some ways, the fact that you have access to a document which is auditable, which makes it auditable and fit for use from an FDA perspective, gives you significant advantage, because when you're looking at a de-identified data set, there is no guarantee that whether in the process of de-identification some of those records were changed. You could be seeing a value of an age of, even at an age level, you could see an age of between 80 and 90, but that is not accurate. Or you could see some of these in a de-identified set, you would probably see some of these change, which is not the case here. So that made us really, really excited, and overall very successful project. In terms of patient counts, Wes, do you want to just give an idea in terms of the patient counts?
Yeah, now don't panic. I don't expect you to be able to read this. Your eyes aren't going, your computer screen's not on. This is just to give you an idea. This is just showing a couple hundred of a lot of the different diseases and accounts. We have, as I said, over 600 diseases. You'll see a link at the bottom. I'm going to ask my colleague Pam if she can post that link into the chat if you want to have it for clicking on, because we post, but for each of the 600 plus diseases, we post the number of patients and caregivers we have in the US at this point. And if you're looking for one that you can't find, please ask us, because some of it can be a matter of identification. We may have classified something as a subdisease, so you may not see it there. For example, I do see we have Duchenne muscular dystrophy there, but in the past we had that as a subdisease under epilepsy. So if you don't see it, please ask. It may be somewhere, or we may have it classified as other. and we can find it for you. We're always interested too in growing the panel in areas of your interest. So if we don't have many, we're always happy to use our methods to find more. So please ask. We're always interested in growing the panel. On the next slide, I wanted to bring attention to the oncology patients we have, because as we've noted, there's so much interest in the cancer category and all the treatments that have come out. And for so many of our cancer patients, we have very good information. We not only have their tumor type, but often the subtype, the stage of the cancer. We have mutation types, the stage of treatment, and age and location, various demographic information. So that's obviously very useful as a starting point to find the patients that you may be looking for to complete this process.
Okay. Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, and I see that Pam has, thanks Pam, has put that link up on the in the chat. Now, to sum up the advantages, we're linking patient records across so many areas. And again, look at all these things that are 90% plus. That is so useful, because you will cover the patients that we have, but 90% even are 99% of the RX data, but 90%. So 90% of the U.S. population. That's the big breakthrough here. That we can link that with the people that have already signed up with us, the oncology and the rare disease patients across 600 plus diseases. So we know once we have those patients and they consent, we can get 90% of their data. That applies to qual and quant research. So the patients we do plenty of both, and they're eager to do whatever fits into your needs. If it's very rare, often it's qual just because the numbers are so small. But often it is quantitative, even for some rare diseases. And then I think very importantly is this can be done very quickly, or relatively quickly. I mean, when we recruit patients, we usually get a standard recruit for us is say 2 weeks, but within a few days we start getting lots of responses to any invitations that we send out. Inder and his group have to do their setups and work on their end, but it's so great that this can be done pretty quickly. And it's considering it's September 14th, everybody's busy. Fourth quarter is fast approaching, but if you have a project of interest here, you get it started now. There's every reason to expect that it will be done within this calendar year. I mean, obviously each one will be worked out on an individual basis, but the way it typically works, that would be well within the time frame. So keep that in mind, especially, again, I know the crazy fourth quarters that so many of us get involved in.
Thank you, Wes. So with that, let's just ask the audience in terms of where do you see the applications? Back to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Inder. So what we'd like to know is, of everything that you've seen today, how might you use these capabilities? Would you use them for patient journeys, clinical trials, outcomes research and safety studies, real world data, real world evidence, or some other purpose? So we'll give you a moment to get your answers in. You can select as many as you like here. All right, they're coming in at a good pace. We'll give you another moment. Still coming in pretty good. All right, let's say last call, close the poll, and we'll share the results with you. Yeah, 75% would like to use the data for patient journeys, and the rest are pretty spread out fairly evenly. Real world evidence, real world data, almost 50%. The others are around a third. Any comments on that, Inder?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we are seeing, obviously. There are, some of these categories are very broad categories, like real world data or real world evidence. And there can be many subtypes of use cases within there. But again, this is where I think it is helpful. If it is helpful, every therapeutic area is different, every project is different. If it is helpful, one of the things that we would like to point out is, since this is a unique approach, it's a new method of doing projects, we are offering as a part of this webinar, for the attendees of this webinar, we are offering a 30-minute private consultation on a first come, first serve basis. That we understand that's Q4 and a lot of these projects are urgent, but to understand if this approach is applicable or not. Again, there are some advantages for this. If there is, if you would like to leverage that opportunity, we are happy to do that. And with that, we would like to answer as many questions as possible. Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Inder. Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, so let's get into it right away. The first question, very interesting. What is the benefit to patients to share their data? Why should I even share my data? And Inder, you're the data guy, so we're going to start with you, and then Wes can jump in.
So I would like Wes to start, actually, because Wes, you have a lot of experience actually talking to these patients.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's similar to all the work we do with patients. So many patients thank us. Thank you for the opportunity to take part, share their opinions. They feel that it's important to have their opinion heard with these companies. They think if it may help them, but if it doesn't help them, they feel it'll help those coming after with this similar disease or the same disease. And we hear that so much. We compensate patients as well. We'll pay patients for the market research portion of these studies at the rate of $100 per hour, and we've paid patients over $7 million over the years. So patients tell us that's kind of the gravy. That's nice on top of it to get paid, but they really are somebody that's interested and cares about what they think and about their disease, and they're very, very excited to do that. The other thing is that we emphasize is the security of this. We use patient ID numbers. We don't, and as our clients know, they're not seeing names. They're not. You know, we're protecting their identity. We're using that information so that Inder can link it with their records. But it's the end clients are certainly not seeing anyone's names. We keep to the IDs to keep that private, and we let patients fear that over time that their confidence will not be revealed.
Yeah, the only thing which I'll add, and Wes, I mean, you're exactly right. The only thing which I'll add, Dan, is that you know, some of the conversations that I've had with patients have been pretty moving, and you know, I've had patients where we've had discussions on them when they've been you know, providing consents, where basically, you know, people have gone and made comments like, if you're able to, you know, I've had a pretty, I mean, as a patient, they would tell us that they've had a pretty you know, pretty difficult journey in terms of getting to treatments, and if their experience can help other patients in managing their diseases better, they are all for it. So I think that's where we see a significant response, and it's actually getting better and better now, that especially with, I mean, what I see is after the real world data being used for COVID vaccines, people are now getting more and more comfortable with sharing this data and see the value of what this data can provide.
Excellent. Well, let's stick with the consent issue now. We've got a good question. Is consent captured on a project by project basis, or are you asking your whole panel to consent somewhat on a global basis?
That's an excellent question. In most cases so far, we have actually consented patients on a project by project basis, and that's what we have done so far. There are some opportunities for some of these disease populations where patients actually as a cohort want to you know, manage their disease better, and you know, we might actually go the way of consenting the panel, but so far it's been on a project by project basis. That's a good question.
Okay, and then just a quick rapid fire follow up to that. How is the consent statement worded? Is it something like, I give you permission to combine my medical records with my survey data, or something else?
It's again on a project by project basis, but generally speaking, what the patients are giving consent to is to use their data for a particular purpose, typically research, and for that, one of the things which it explicitly would say is that the data which would be used would only be used in a de-identified or an aggregated fashion. So that's typically what we see.
Excellent. Okay, so let's switch gears to another topic. Diversity and inclusion is extremely important in healthcare and clinical research. So how are you ensuring diversity in your patient population, including the voice of the unheard who may want to participate, but not in an advocacy group or in a typical panel?
Wes, do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, that's always an important issue. I mean, with so many rare diseases, we'll take as many and whoever we can get, but we always want to reach out and try to find more. That's why we like, it's not just about the more involved people that may come to a patient event, but we love the fact they'll refer others and groups out, and we'll get people that might never go to an event, but they'll come to us in one way, shape, or form. So it's not all the more involved, and just by going to so many different events, many in the inner city, many in rural areas, all across the country, it helps us see a lot of people of all diverse persuasions across all these different diseases. But it's not quite like doing a general pop study that matches the US Census. It's like, well, wait a minute, these are rare. We may, as we publish on our site, we may only have 52 of a certain disease area, and we're happy to identify what their demographics are. But most important to us is finding them. We can't always guarantee that they will match a US, census breakdown.
Fair enough. You did mention compensation, I think, earlier, Wes. I believe that was you. And the question is, are these patients compensated, and how does that work?
So in all the work that we do, or virtually all, sometimes there's academic studies and all where they have to realize that, we let them know that they may not be compensated, but we try to compensate patients at the rate of $100 per hour of their time. So a telephone interview is usually scheduled for an hour, but an online survey could be from 15 or 30 minutes, whatever, but then it breaks it down based on the $100. And what we do is at the conclusion of each study, we send them a check. So because we find gift cards are nice, but so many people, they need it to pay rent, they need it for co-pays. Gift cards don't always do that. And we like it as a further validity check, because anybody can get email addresses, but how many real concrete brick and mortar addresses can somebody get? So it's one of them. For all those reasons, we love to do that. We pay them quickly and we pay by check.
One addition which I'd like to point out here is that we follow all the fair market pricing rules which are in place. Obviously, all this based on the experience of several years that Wes has been doing this. We are pretty, involved with in terms of understanding on a project by project basis what is the fair market price that a patient actually should be paid, and that's what we would follow.
Excellent. Okay, so we know that everything's moving to digital, but not everything is digital yet. So this questioner would like to know, are you able to assess handwritten physician notes?
We can, and I'm happy to say that problem, when we started back in 2013, what we would do is, and those technologies are still around. We would have a fax server where the notes would be faxed to us, and then we would use tools like NLP, not very accurate for handwritten notes, so on and so forth, other mechanisms to be able to make sense out of them. Those technologies are still around and we can use them, but I'm happy to report that for more and more projects, we do not need to do that anymore. We are seeing very good adoption of electronic EMRs and other other electronic systems where a lot of this data is now digitized.
Excellent. All right, we're going to try and squeeze a couple more quick questions in the last couple minutes. So how do you find consented/named patients in real world data when real world data is de-identified?
So that's a good question. And that is again a very project specific question. A lot of times one of the requirements of using this approach is that we do need patient consents. Now, in the real world data setting that is being described, and we are happy to have a specific discussion with the individual who actually has this need. But if this was a part of a clinical trial which was done, or a part of a patient support program or otherwise, we would need to look at those consents, and that would drive whether we can apply this approach or not. But for most cases, we would work with consented. We would need some sort of a consent before we can provide this capability.
Excellent. Okay, we'll do one more real quick one. I know we're right at the top of the hour, but this is kind of one that can wrap it up nicely. How do you assess the quality of your data?
I can take that. Actually, we were recently approached by, a project which is an FDA project where they wanted to work with us. The FDA actually is interested in this approach because one of the benefits of this approach is that we are all the findings, though we presenting everything on, typically on a de-identified basis with some exceptions or an aggregated basis, we have the primary care documents for if there was ever a need for verification purposes and so on and so forth. So I think that from that purpose, for that reason, the quality of work that you see is extremely high because this is all validated in some ways documents coming from EMRs or other sources, and they are available for verification if needed.
Outstanding. Well, that's going to do it for Q&A. So I hope you've all benefited from this event and have taken away some new insights. And if any of your colleagues missed the presentation, or if you want to see it again, it will be available as a recording in about 24 hours, and you'll be notified via email. I'm going to give our speakers one chance for some parting words of wisdom before we shut down. Who wants to take this?
I can go first, and Wes, you can go after me. I would like to thank each and everyone for joining. If you have, again, we are very excited about bringing this capability to use on providing value to patients. So if you have any specific opportunities, please feel free to reach out to either me or Wes. Our emails are on the screen. And Wes?
Yeah, I would just say again, thanks. Tremendous, not only attendance but participation. I see a lot of questions we didn't get to. Maybe there's a way we can get to those and reach out to folks with answers. We certainly would rather answer everything if possible. So we'll figure out if there's a way we can do that.
Absolutely, I would encourage that. So I would like to thank our friends at Rare Patient Voice and Clinakos, and of course our expert panelists for partnering with us on such a great event. This is actually one of our most popular events of the year, so very exciting about that. And I'd also like to encourage you to consider our past and future web seminars and virtual panels by visiting pharmavoice.com. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. The event is now over.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.